Hello, everybody, and welcome to this SIAH webinar on heritage and Harry Potter. We're absolutely thrilled and delighted to have Stephen Manion with us today. He is currently the Executive Director of Go Southampton, representing 630 businesses in the city. But before that, he was the manager at Alnwick Castle, the location for Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and he negotiated the filming of the Harry Potter movies with Warner Brothers. So he was the guy that took the call. And he has extensive experience in heritage attraction and destination management. So he's also worked at Arundel Castle and was the head of education at Beamish Museum. So we're really, really thrilled to have you here today, Stephen, and all that wealth of expertise that you're able to share with us. Today in our conversation with you, we have Michael Williams, who's Professor of Film Studies, and Kevin Brazil, who's Associate Professor of English Literature, as well as myself, Joanna Sofaer. I'm a Professor of Archaeology and the co-director of the Southampton Institute for Arts and Humanities. And given that kind of breadth of experience and the relationship between heritage, film and literature, we thought it'd be lovely to have this kind of slightly more roundtable format. So without further ado, I think we'll just sort of jump into that conversation with you, Stephen. Yep. And I'm going to hand over to Michael, because he's going to kick off being the Professor of Film Studies and Harry Potter. It seems that it's a good way to start. So Michael, over to you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Hello, Stephen. I've got a picture of a certain castle in the background. Yeah, Alnwick, from when I went there, I think it's 2011. Could I ask you to kind of think back to like the beginnings of where it started with Harry Potter, as you said, you sort of taking that call, and I think you've described it as a career-defining moment somewhere in an interview. Could you kind of tell us how that first connection was made, and how did you negotiate how it went from that point?
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, there's a short question and a very long answer potentially, so I'll try and keep it concise. I was managing Alnwick Castle. I came to the castle from Beamish Museum, which many of your listeners may know of. It's an open air museum in County Durham, and it was used a lot for filming by Catherine Cookson books and things like that. So I was familiar with the world of film and TV and photo shoots. I came to Alnwick Castle. It was an historic property in the northeast of England, in a remote Northumberland town, and they had some experience, but I got to know what was then called the Northern Screen Commission, and then they're called like film officers now and things like that. So the organisation that tries and promotes and draws in filming and photo opportunities. I got to know them, but then also I started to get calls from location managers and location scouts. And I would probably get a call once a month or something for various things. Sometimes there'd be a local BBC TV series, and the great thing about what I was able to do was I was able to say yes most of the time. And even if the yes was a no, it was, but there's a good reason. But mostly we were able to say yes. So in the world of film location work, people who say yes, they love them. They love people who say yes. So, and I got a call from a chap called Keith. One of my location manager calls. He said, I was speaking to Gail at Northern Screen Commission. She suggested I talk to you. And I said, yeah, okay, come up. And that was really, another location shot. And funny enough, the picture, your head behind your head there, we were stood on the top of those. There you are, the crenellations at the top there. We were stood on the top there, and he was talking to me about Quidditch. And I was just going, okay. There was a time, and that was it. And off he went, and pretty much a routine inquiry. but you know, I gave them the full talk, the full tour, the aerial view from the tops of the buildings, the location, the places where you can park vehicles, the backup services we could offer, the skills we could offer. We could offer a sawmill of timber. You know, we had a huge resource. So we spent this couple of hours looking at all the picture, but I did it pretty much with any location manager that showed up. And then about a week later, he rang again. Can I bring the production designer with me? Okay. No name of any film, no name of any book, no name of anything. It was all very much under wraps, and I think he let us slip when he said Quidditch when he first came to me. But they then started to talk animatedly about schools and locations and that. I started thinking, and then about a fortnight later, a coach of people from Los Angeles turned up. They did ring beforehand, I hasten to add, they didn't just turn up. And it was Chris Columbus and all the production team and things like that. And we walked and we talked, and I'd already spoken to the owners, because obviously and I knew it was a children's book. You know, this is the world that period was. It was a children's book. The family, the Duke and Duchess of Northumberland, family orientated. Yeah, let's go for it. So they came around. We walked and we talked. I've got this photograph of about 12 people stood there peering through lenses and things like that, and talking in this strange language. And then it went quiet for a while, which was slightly unusual, but not out of the ordinary. In the meantime, we were still doing other things. We had a film in for Whoopi Goldberg came in and went. You might have seen it on a Sunday morning on Channel 5 or something like that. It was, you know, straight to DVD type film, but you know, it was a film location. And then the local location manager gave me a call. You all know him. He's a hairy biker. And he and I were great friends, because I usually offer him location for all sorts of things when he was location manager. And he says, I've just been contacted by so-and-so. They want me to do a little local scouting while I'm here. So we ended up talking, and then we started getting messages. They need this much space for the base, this much space for vehicles, car parking, green rooms. Basically, I just went, yes, we've got 120,000 acres of the county. we can spare a bit of space. As it was, we just needed the castle grounds, our staff car park. Not the tricky bit, but the bit we had to consider was the castle is a family home, a visitor attraction, but also it's a workplace. And there's multiple businesses. It's the headquarters of Northumberland Estates. So you've got finance, you've got property management, you've got HR, you've got all those other people. So there was a lot of negotiation going on for me internally to enable it to happen, because and even then we were still not quite sure what it was all about. But there was people turning up to take measures and all sorts of things over the coming weeks. And then I say that the show rolled into town in the autumn of 2020, 2000, and started, and we had the large, I mean, just, I know there'll be other things we're going to talk about, but I'll just say we had the largest location shoot in Europe at the time. Hundreds of crew, dozens of actors, people supplying catering and all that sort of thing. They are very much self-contained, as you probably know. So, you know, our entire staff car park was taken up by their catering wagons. And I think the realization, you commented about the career-defining phone call, and I used to say to people, always answer the phone. You never know quite who's on the end of it. The career-defining moment for me a little bit was on a train going to London, and there was two people sat opposite me, and they opened a magazine, and they went, "Secret locations of Harry Potter revealed." And I'm going, okay. And then there was a picture of the castles, rather like your cinema, spread across the double page of the magazine, and it was two young women reading it, and they closed the magazine, and it was Heat magazine, which some of you may or may not know, but it's not a film magazine, it's not a historic property magazine, it's a very populist. And And that's when we realized there was something special about what was going to happen. So in a matter of, it was a relatively short period of about 3 months from that first visit to us hitting mainstream media. But yes, it did define, because we've also were the location for Elizabeth, the film Elizabeth. It caused a blip in our visitor graph. But that was it, really. Yeah. Even though they'd ripped the ground up, they built the entire town inside the grounds behind you there. But it very registered on the public's radar. So that's why this one was so different. But it could have been a one-day wonder. It still could have been a flash in the pan. So I think that's where we got to.
Yeah. And is it right that your son had a sort of an extra role or a background artist role as well?
Yes, that was. There was. I'll tell you a little story about the casting. Bear in mind, this is London companies with an American background, and secrecy and privacy was absolutely paramount. That's a bad studio pun there, but never mind. It was, we were sworn to secrecy. We had to sign all sorts of documents that we wouldn't tell people what was happening. And the location manager was just talking me through how it was going to happen with when the casting would turn up, because they needed a load of extras. They needed dozens and dozens of children. And I said, well, we've got a really good local middle school. I'm frozen. Hang on. We had a local. I think my camera's just gone off. We had a local middle school who were very, very engaged with us, very supportive. And we said, right, let's give these guys first refusal, first offer to take part. And so I got in touch with their head teacher. They said, yes, we'd love to, but they were still going to have to audition them. And then he was, and I said something about, oh, yeah, I've got a son. He went, oh, he's in. And that was it. Simple as that. And I went, okay. Anyway, the casting day came along, and it was a Friday evening. Obviously, you've been to Alnwick, you know Alnwick. It's a small market town, 9,000 souls. And we've got a little town square with a building. And I wandered around at 6:15. They were going to start happening. And I said, oh, are you the Harry Potter? By now we knew there was something happening. Harry Potter casting crew. And this person looked at me as if I was some kind of secret agent. Or he said, how would you know? I said, well, A, I'm the manager of the castle and I'm lazy. And B, you're in the middle of an empty town centre with a bus and a load of people going into the Northumberland Hall. Oh, right. I said, this is a market town. It's not London. It's not Los Angeles. This is a small market town. People sport. And we've invited 100 local children to this place. So just getting the cultural difference between an international film company and a small market town was an interesting dynamic. Mm. So they cast, and they took about 50 or 60 of these local children. But yeah, I must admit, my son did get sort of bypass all that. He was 10 at the time, so perfect age. And just a little aside, he was going in for his first day, and he got slightly unruly hair. So his mum, my wife, combed his hair and said, let's look a bit smarter. So she combed his hair down, and he's got slightly reddish hair. And he went to the wardrobes department, and they said, right, let's get this all messed up again. They just spiked it up with gel and things like that, made him all look a bit more like spiky haired. And he put all his costume on. When we had the second film, it was a different location manager, a chap called Nick Daubney. And Nick had at the time, he had like a mobile phone, computer, little mobile computers at the time. And he flipped it open and he said, contact at Alnwick Castle, me, son, Christopher, age 10. And he said, oh, I gather your son's involved in the film. So he got in the second film as well. So he was in the background, though. You know, you realize how much is out of focus when you watch a film. So yes, but at the time I said to him, well, Chris, what do you think of that? He went, 35 quid a day. That was his measure. He wasn't particularly interested in the film. I have to say, as he's grown up, of course, his whole generation has grown up at the same age as him. Mm. And now he finds it quite a useful chat line when he got to about 18, 19, 20, that he was able to say, 1 hour foot. There's me in the background. So, but they were very, in terms of managing the local population, local community, I have to say they were exceptionally good, and that really went down well with the town and the invasion of lorries and coaches and film crew. So yeah, he was, but he now has a little. I've captured the picture of him in the screen, and he's got that in his little folder now.
I kind of had a question that follows on from what you just said about that was the town then, but my question is more about the town now. So in one of these like great coincidences, a couple of weeks ago, before this event, there was a piece in the Financial Times about Harry Potter tourism, which just gave me like a load of facts that I didn't know. You know, almost half of all visitors surveyed by Visit England, when asked why did they come to Britain, they said they come for Harry Potter. So it's like half, you know, and it kind of went through all the locations like York, Alnwick, Oxford, whatever, where it's like transforming the economy. And like another stat that really stood out to me was the National Trust alone makes 2 million a year from Harry Potter related stuff that goes right into conservation. So if there was ever a doubt, it's a huge industry. It is. And I was just so curious, like what has been your experiencing managing a site like that with global tourism, and maybe where do you think it's going to go next? Because there's apparently a whole new series of HBO TV shows coming out.
I mean, that's very interesting. Obviously, we're looking back with a little bit of hindsight now, aren't we? Which is a great view to have. And I say, going back to what I said, when we were sitting there, the best part of 20 years ago now, looking forward, it was a case of make the most of it now, because who knows what will happen in a year, 5 years hence. But just to give you some numbers for visitor numbers, when I started the castle, it had 52,000 visitors a year. By the time we are after the Harry Potter phenomenon, I think we can call it that now, it was hitting 272,000 visitors a year. But the interesting thing was the different demographic of the visitor. Right. When I went there, I went from an attraction which was pulling in 500,000 visitors a year with families. I went to an attraction which was pretty staid, pretty dull, to be honest with you, and it attracted a certain age profile. They were generally adults, they were generally retired adults. You go there now, and I don't know whether you found this, maybe more families are there, there's youngsters, there's people of all ages. What it did give us, because obviously we realised, that when Film 2 came back and the publicity that was around it, and you're right, I mean, one thing we did insist on was a credit on the end of the film, a location credit. And I was told Warner Brothers don't do that. I said, we'd like it, please. And then we dropped the please. And we got it. We got it. They then listed everybody else, but that's by the by. We got it. And I sat and watched the film to make sure they did it, because, we got that into the contract. Because that's important for us. But the difference between that was you can change visitor numbers very, very quickly. You can't change infrastructure quickly. So the castle was still the same size. We still had the same number of staff. We still had the same number of toilets. We still had the cafe and restaurant. The town still had the same number of accommodation. The roads were still the same. Everything was still the same as it was with a town with 9,000 people and 50,000 visitors, or 50. Suddenly, and what we've got to remember as well, coinciding with that, we were developing a garden attraction, the Alnwick Garden, which you may have gone to when you were there. And we were projecting, 600,000-700,000 visitors a year across the two pieces. So suddenly we're looking at a town being swamped because we had to get. So but what it did give us is enabled us to invest in new attraction. We had some indoor stabling, which had an exercise area, which when I first there, it was shut, blocked off. We then made that a family area with activities and entertainment. We spread the load. We opened up more of the grounds, which had beforehand a little fence across, just to let people go and have a picnic on the grounds. And we recruited more staff. We had to create a one-way system through the building, and we took out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 officers and 2 storerooms to create a route out of the castle, so that nobody actually went like that. Everybody went one way and then out, just so we got flow. Because one of the issues is things like when you walk up the main staircase in the castle building, and the interior wasn't used of the castle, it was exterior. At the top, there's a hallway entrance, and if you've been there, the main flight of stairs, you go upstairs, and it's tiny little tesserae tiles, and every foot goes on does that, turns, and the grit on your foot grinds the tesserae. And we went from 52,000 times 2 pair of feet, so 100,000 feet, to the best part of 500,000 feet going. So we had to protect that. So we had to protect it, and that reduced the volume. So the impact on the building had to be measured, had to be monitored, had to be mitigated. The library, we had to be careful because our breath, the volume of breath in the room was different. The atmosphere changed its level of humidity. So we had to introduce some very, very subtle and very clever little ventilation in a historic building. And one thing I think I would very much stress is that we kept the integrity of the building. You know, we didn't turn it into Harry Potter land. That's down in Leavesden Studios now, but you know, we kept the integrity. What we did found the benefit was that it attracted new visitors, a whole new range of visitors coming in. You mentioned people choosing to come because of Harry Potter. We had university students choosing to come to Newcastle University because it was near Alnwick. You know, because they'd grown up with it. Yeah. You know, they were 10, 12, 13 years old, and by the time they got to 18, 19, you know, they were part of the group. I had a chief executive of a national charity got married at the castle because they were Harry Potter fans. I was interviewed probably by journalists from every continent, Antarctica maybe aside, but every other continent I had interviews with. We had, you know, remember the holiday travel programs? We had them from Australia, America, Russia. There's a different world, isn't it? And Europe. The tourist trade, phenomenal. I went to the travel trade shows. You go to tourism trade shows, which are, you know, we're promoting to coach operators and travel operators. I went to one in London one year, and I'm going to, sorry, you said something, I'm going to repeat what you said. And they looked at our stand and went, Alnwick Castle, where's that? And I went, Northumberland. This glazed expression came over their faces. Okay, you know, move on. 3 years later, I went back to it, and somebody came up to me and said, Alnwick Castle, we're going there. And that was just in a matter of 2 or 3 years, the awareness in what the general visitors, the tour operators, rose so much. And we did build new car parks. There was new accommodation. Hotels have been built. So the impact, along with, I say we had a garden doing as well, so there was a double impact, has been enormous. And I would say, though, that not everybody's accepted it, because it's suddenly become a very, very busy town for a while. You know, and people had moved there because it was a quiet, sleepy market town. So not everybody welcomed it. But I say it was majority of the population in the area saw the benefits, whether they run a bed and breakfast or whether their shop was better, or they just liked being the centre of attraction. But also what it did do, and I mentioned, you know, that I used to get calls from location managers and screen commission and people like that. It showed that we could do it. It showed that we could accommodate a very large film crew. We could accommodate, actors of international renown, and that we were smooth, we were slick. But we had our parameters, and people knew that. And so we got contacted, and TV series I've long forgotten about now came. They might just do a day two shoot, but they knew that from that, that location made a network, little black book they have. So they were very, very keen to talk to us. Everybody wanted to be associated with, and there's a spot where because we were, we're Instagram now, but the days of just taking a photograph, everybody walked through an archway and stopped, and the grass used to wear away where they stopped, which didn't matter, it's grass, you just repair it. But they wanted that photograph that you're sat in front of now, Michael, because that's sort of the scene that people recognise. And you know, we did introduce activities. You know, our shop started retailing broomsticks. My shop manager, bear in mind, in the first year or two, came and said, "Do you think we should stock some broomsticks?" And we did. We went, "Yeah, maybe we should. You know, just maybe we should." And then he came back about a day later and said, "I'll order some more." And that was, you know, and then the shop that if you've seen the shop in the last 8-10 years, it's completely different. I mean, the shop was no bigger than, it's about 3 telephone boxes, but now it's a massive retail opportunity. You've got, you know, the amount of material you can buy, and we did have activities for kids. We were used by the publisher to launch the last book. I mean, it was one of these ones that they launched it. I mean, it wasn't the public launch; it was a launch they did, but they brought up a load of super fans, and they brought up and J.K. Rowling signed all their books and things like that. So for them, it was a thing, but that was everybody. We were very, very popular, and I say, you know, our weddings business took off. We refurbished every public space we had because of the investment that we'd spend on it then. But I say we'd never let the integrity of the building or the story of the family be lost. You were in.
I think that's what I really wanted to jump in on now, Stephen, because that thing about the tension between the reality of a place and the fantasy of a place, and people going to visit because it's a fantasy.
Yeah.
So how do you, as a heritage manager, you know, kind of do that delicate balancing act between the story of the family and the integrity of the building, and actually, you know, responding to the reason why people have come, which is the film and the fantasy?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we tried to do is, I say, we weren't going to create an area which said that you're entering Potterland. You know, that was, and you know, we actually said that internally. We said we will not do that. But what we did do is we had sufficient, I think, activities and engagement whereby, you know, let's take a family as an example, because that was the biggest market change we got, families. So you would get people coming, and they were the fans. So there was photo opportunities. We had the Warner Bros. Very kindly allowed us to use some stills which we could blow up. So you could stand in front and get your photograph taken with the broomstick scene, for example. Then there was, you know, we did some broomstick training with kids and things like that. But you stepped inside that castle, the building behind Michael there, the keep. You saw nothing about Harry Potter, but you were engaged, you were good. And one thing that we did have feedback from was people walked into the grounds and went, "It's not as big as it looks in the film." But our staff were all prepared to say a lot of it. I mean, CGI. I mean, we know it's CGI, but you know, it was the fact that, you know, this is only part of it. You know, there's a lot of it was built around. So there was some people, expectation was more the scale of what they expect to see Hogwarts in its full glory, and of course it doesn't exist. It's a model about, you know, that big in a studio, in effect. But I think that what we did was, because our story is so strong anyway, we've got blood, guts, and gore. We've got decapitations. We've got treason. We've got all the bits that appeal to people who are, let's call it, you know, who are interested in history as a story of people and adventure. And we had, you know, why was the castle built in the first place? It was a war zone, you know, and of course, and it is a very beautiful location. It's lovely views. And what we found, most visitors found, that this had brought them to it, but they actually enjoyed the whole experience. And that's what our reaction from our visitors was. And we've now got families, well, I know now families are coming back with their children who grew up with it, because, you know, the generations are moving on. And, you know, if people want Harry Potter World, they go to Harry Potter World. And bear in mind that Leavesden Studios, when they were doing the filming, was Leavesden Studios. But they hired all 5 sets, all 5 stages. So when we went, very kindly, they invited myself and my son down to see the studios when they were filming film 2. And now, of course, that's now become the outside Watford is event. So you can get the fantasy, you can get the experience of that. But we found that because the castle was impressive, because we had activities which were around the story of, what it was like to grow up in a castle, what it was like to be a knight or a lady or all that sort of thing, which people love and do. And the family story, as I say, is rich in tapestry of, a very British aristocracy family, but it is very much in the civil, everything from civil wars to Scottish wars. So I think most people got it. And I don't think they could buy a broomstick, they could buy a wand, they could buy a cape. And we didn't do themed meals in the restaurant. We didn't do anything like that as a general rule. So we found that most people, and the dwell time went for about 1.5 hours to 3 hours, average dwell time at the castle. And in effect, it was the same building, but people were spending more time. Our staff were much more energized by it because they were getting young, enthusiastic, I'm saying young, I mean, young people of all age who were curious. And that was what was bringing out. We were encouraging curiosity rather than just a passive experience. But it was all about activity and engagement, but it was not core to it. But yeah, we know that it transformed the castle, and that as an attraction, as an attracting attraction. Yeah.
I mean, I had a question that kind of comes on from the fantasy reality thing, as the book person, right? I always think, well, we've got films, we've got theme parks, we've got heritage sites. It all started with these books, these children's books. And it's like these stories clearly gripped people's imaginations and they take them into these sites. And I really loved what you're saying about how you manage that thing of they think they're coming in for Harry Potter, but then you actually give them a different story. And then maybe people who wouldn't be interested in history or actually then get very interested in history. And then they'll, I just kind of loved how you manage that. So I guess my just kind of general question, like, how do you think sites like this can leverage literature or stories for their visitors, for their brand? And I know you're in Southampton now, like do you think there's potential to do that here? Do you have a sense of like what stories are effective and how do you make them effective?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've used the word stories on several occasions there when you were talking, and I think that whole thing about when we were doing the castle and when I did work at Arundel as well, and here it's stories are integral through the whole thing. It's the stories of a town, but the stories usually relate around to the people that are there. Right. And whether it's people who are telling the stories, retelling the stories, or reading the stories, or writing the stories. I mean, we've got a chap who's done some mystery tours that he worked with us on. I mean, he was doing them, he just came to us to talk about them. But it's all about a little story about going through the city. But it picks up all the key heritage sites, the key story points that even people who've known the town and the city centre for many, many years going, oh, I didn't know that. Because he's explored and he's delved into it and he made it into a very accessible, almost cartoon type story, but a bit of fun. And I think the fun enjoyment bit is there as well. And also it also gives a great inspiration for your writing for today, but what tomorrow's writers. Let's inspire them as well to write, to read. And we know that in the past that, I mean, when I was at Arundel, we did things where we just said, right, imagine you are X, what do you want to be? Imagine you are that. Because again, there's a huge storyline there. I mean, the Duke of Norfolk is the Earl Marshal. Most people go, what's the Earl Marshal? I dare say you're doing that. Are you?
Yes, I am. Yeah,
you're doing that. Okay. The Earl Marshal. If you watch the Houses of Parliament state opening, you will see the Duke of Norfolk front and centre directing the affairs. If you watch the coronation of the King, you would have seen the Duke of Norfolk front and centre coordinate. He is he organises all state events, and he's done it since not him personally, since 1483. But what a storyline to go through. And at the same time, the Earl Marshal also hosted the main jousting events. So there's huge amounts of stories there. It's not just a pile of stones. It's what's happened. So, we use it to inspire imagination, inspire creativity, and that can be demonstrated through word or actions. And and but it doesn't have to be. It can be fun, it can be enjoyable, it can be lively. So we want to articulate that and enable that to happen, and that's where we think Southampton can all do as well. You walk around, you see the walls, you see the fact that the water is no longer where it was. So what was it like when the water was lapping up against the walls? What was why is Southampton where it is? Why it's so important? So there's great stories. The whole. I mean, everybody talks about Titanic, but the whole business of being a maritime city is significant and it's important. And I don't think that we can avoid the fact that every city has a story. Some of them are a bit awkward to tell. People get a bit awkward about the Titanic story here. It has a legacy of, families were affected, but it is a story that people want to hear. You were at a cruise port, which I did the other day, and the first 19 people coming off the ship go, "Where's the Titanic Museum? Where's the Titanic story?"
Wow.
And so that's what our international visitors are wanting to know. We just have to do difficulty telling it because it's so affected. Belfast just said, "Let's build a big place and tell the story." But there is story, and I think this whole sort of reading, writing, telling stories is so important. And we would love to be able to do that, and I think it brings our heritage, our stories, and our culture much closer to people. And it can be through the word, whether it's spoken or written.
I think I'll come to Southampton in a moment, but I just ask you about the kind of film side again, just briefly, because it's really interesting hearing you talk about Alnwick as a kind of heritage cultural site and things you're balancing the integrity of the building you mentioned. And I think it's always interesting about that idea of sort of authenticity when you're presenting the past and telling stories about it to visitors and kind of what you're authentic to and which histories you're telling. So it's interesting how you're drawing the lines and the boundaries between all that. You mentioned, I think, Elizabeth being filmed at the site as well. I know at the website for the castle, it lists a really impressive list of so many film and TV shows that have been filmed there, going back like the Blackadder in the 80s and Robin Hood with the Virgin Queen later, Downton Abbey, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. There's such a long list there. And Arundel as well, where you worked. Has been used for things like Wonder Woman, The Madness of King George, and lots of other productions. Have you got any particular stories of your experience working for other productions relating to that heritage side of things?
I mean, I'm sorry, you're frozen a little bit there too. Was it experience of working in other places with films?
Yes.
Actually, I did another one, which I was working with. I just gone blank name of the house. Alnwick Castle, which is in southwest Scotland, near Dumfries. And it wasn't the castle that they wanted. They wanted a house to convert for a film called Under the Skin. And they wanted an old cottage. So not the grandeur, but an old cottage. And it was a film with, I'm going to say the name of the actress and I can't remember her name. Scarlett Johansson. Now, that was very interesting because they weren't the least bit interested in the heritage. They weren't the least bit interested in the story. They weren't the least bit interested in the backdrop. They wanted a space that they could make into look like a ghoulish room. I don't quite know they didn't use a studio, I'll be perfectly honest, but they just they didn't care where it was or what it looked like in the backdrop. They just wanted somewhere they could make into a space where it looked like some kind of cannibalistic creature lived. So, that was not really telling our heritage, but, it gave us to be honest with you, it gives you income. There's an income element to it. And I think that's always important to remember that. And I think one of the things is that we also used to do a lot of things which were more TV shows, which I mentioned Beamish before. We used to do Catherine Cookson, which is a very popular storytelling, books from the past. But I would say that one of the things that I particularly, the reason I enjoy it is because, enjoyed it particularly during that time, is because they are looking for the genuine, the authentic, the real. They might augment it, to use a more modern word, but they may augment it. But at the core of it, they wanted the real. And it's interesting, a location manager said to me about 20 odd years ago, I think in 20 years' time, our jobs will no longer exist. And he was wrong, wasn't he? Because they still want the real. The directors still want the reality. They want to have a wall you can touch. They may build sets, they may build software programs, they may all sorts of wonderful, but a lot of them still want to touch and feel and get the reality of a building. And I think that's why it will continue doing. But we also can miss out. I was doing some work with Woburn Abbey, which some of you may know, which is in Bedfordshire. And we had an actor which crosses the two programs film we've been talking about, sadly died, but he came and he looked across this landscape. Location manager said, "I've got a perfect 18th century landscape for you." And he came and he got out of his car, looked at it and went, "No," got in the car and drove off. Just like that. And he played Snape in the Harry Potter films. And it was just, they can be very dismissive as well. It can be a very instantaneous reaction. That's not what he wanted, move on. And the location manager looked very crestfallen, apologised, got in the car with him and drove off as well. So that's sort of slightly amusing fun when it happens, but it was a bit of a waste of time. But that does happen. So I have enjoyed working with them. They are very considerate, but you've got to draw the lines and be quite firm sometimes. When you're in the castle there, we used to have 70 young students staying there, 20-year-old American students. So it was also a place that young people lived. Sorry, I probably didn't quite answer your question there, but I just got on a tangent.
No, that's great, thanks.
We're kind of slightly running out of time before we have to go to questions. So I just want to get in a very final, last quick one before we move to the questions. Mm-hmm. And that is, of course, you started talking about Southampton, and that's where you are now. And I'm really interested in what you think in your current role, how you're leveraging this experience to develop opportunities for Southampton. We have, was it 2 million cruise passengers a year, maybe even more, who come through the port, who don't stay here. They're often going off to, other destinations, and how you think that all this experience that you bring to bear can be used to kind of galvanise the city and create tourism opportunity and destination management in use. I think you're right. I mean, it was 2.6 million last year, but they were just for, it's now some of those are getting on a cruise ship and going on holiday, and but trying to get them to pause. But you've also got people coming on what we call the transit, who come for the day. They're on a cruise from Germany or wherever. And I think one of the things that we need to work on is that story. What is the story of Southampton? What is it we're trying to tell? People get off the ship, or for example, and they go, okay, where am I? What is there here to see? And having that story of this, I said to somebody the other day, I said, did anybody know anything about Southampton? They didn't know anything about it. They knew nothing about it. They lived 58 miles that way. They knew nothing about the place. So I think we have a big storytelling to do, and to bring the fact that those walls and those buildings are there as a tangible evidence of a massively big story that has kings, it has invasions, it has fear of war all the time running through it. And it's quite amusing. Everybody says it's quite amusing when I go to Arundel Tower, because Arundel Tower, yeah, I know, yeah. But that connection with the history, and I think that what we need to do is package. I don't like the word package, but it is a word that we use internally in tourism. Is package that heritage story and get it clear that you tell it, I tell it, everybody else tells the story, and that we became a coherent. People go, why do you go to York? Oh, because of the history. They just go because of the history. People don't come to Southampton because of the history. They come to Southampton to shop at West Quay. And is West Quay the way to bring people in and show them the rest of the story? Maybe it is. The cruise ship passengers, though, are, there's 2,000 get off a cruise ship a week who don't go to Stonehenge, who don't go to London. They get off and they come to the town. We need to be able to manage and develop their awareness of not telling the quickest way to get to West Quay, but the best way to get to West Quay. How do you go around, and how do you find out the story? How do you use
technology? How do you use people to tell that story? We're putting people down the port now to try and direct them to just follow the route that shows the storyline. It's got to be something where people say, okay, I can find out this. You need to have multiple experiences. You can't just go to a place and get one experience. It's not going to be the 1.5 hour. So you've got to go and say, right, okay, we're going to go and have a walk around, we're going to explore, we're going to get some visual interpretation of the storyline, we're going to go and visit an attraction, we're going to do a bit of shopping, we're going to have something to eat, and we're going to hear some interesting information and learn something, enjoy a view. We have a bar gate which sits up with a Burger King and a Poundland as a backdrop. Where's the imagery? Where's the photographs? Where's the picture that says this is an historic place? Everybody knows my opinion of how the bar gate's presented. It's sitting in a sort of broken bit of paving, and I think that's a shame. And it needs to be brought up. People need to be recognising it instead of building flats right next to them or putting brightly coloured shop frontages in the photographs. So I think what we need to do is get a story that we all share and a narrative of what the story is and the story from its past into its future, so that when somebody turns up at a port, they almost subliminally know it. We don't see any filming done here. I'm not aware of any filming particularly done here. Whether it's documentary or people saying, oh, that's the backdrop for a film. I can see Manchester, I can see Stockport. There's been 2 major series on Netflix. Stockport has been front and centre. What Stockport got that Southampton hasn't got? A will to do it. And I think it's getting that will to do it. And that's people like, yourselves at universities, the council, the private sector, the business sector, all the cultural sector people that are here need to get together and shape that future, shape that story. And your knowledge and expertise and your various contacts within that can bring it together. But we don't have that shared narrative yet. And I think the will to do it's got to be there. And we're only one part of it. And the reason that we did it previously was everybody signed up to it and did it. And that was even if it was quite, sometimes conversations were quite difficult, but they worked.
Mm. Thanks, Steve. That's super, super interesting. I'm sure we could talk much more. We've only got 10 minutes now to move into the questions. So we've got a couple in the chat so far. So Heather and Ariana want to ask, did you have any criticism from other people in the field, heritage managers or local government responsible for other heritage, for example, for your decision to work with Warner Brothers on the project?
If it was, I never heard it. I had a lot of envy and jealousy. And,
I bet. Yes.
I'll give you a quick example. A very good friend of mine used to manage part of Durham Cathedral, and we'd ring each other in the morning and say, "Broomsticks arrived." "Yep, they've arrived here." So I think people like the church ones got more criticism because of the nature of the storylines being interpreted. And I was on a massive national network. I used to have regular conference meetings, things like that. Most of them go, "How the hell did you get it?" So no, because we didn't destroy that main integrity of the storyline. Most people are completely envious of what we did.
So you feel like now you're here, but you obviously had to hand over to someone else at some point. And do you think that precedent that you set has been continued? Have they kept going in that same way?
Yeah, I mean, there was always going to be a point where it would be a case of there's so many visitors you can take before it becomes a poor experience, or overwhelms the place. And I think it's pretty much reached that now. Now it's managing it. Now you manage numbers through a variety of tasks. Mostly put the price up. So it's trying to keep it so that it doesn't spoil the experience. And that's why other attractions opening in the area is always good, because it spreads that load. And that's what generates. I say we've got the garden. If Mike, you were there I don't know if you were, the big new adventure playground, which was being planned when I was there, has now been delivered, and it's the largest playground of its type, woodland. So it's extending and expanding but taking the pressure off the main core buildings, which was actually important. And the people I used to work for, we've now got 3 new hotels. We've got a retail park. So the principle of developing the town as a visitor economy-based town has been kept going, but it was rejuvenated by the Harry Potter phenomenon and the garden coming along as well.
Thank you. So Miranda would like to ask, what was your background prior to managing these sites? So I know we do have a number of our students who are on this webinar, and I guess they're all thinking, I don't know if Miranda's a student, but some certainly are definitely thinking about careers and how to enter into heritage management. So can you just tell us a little bit about how you navigate a career in this world?
If I had the answer, I'd bottle it and sell it. I did a history degree. I did a history degree in 19th century history, which is completely different to medieval life. I went to become a museum curator in Liverpool Museums, which is National Museum to Galleries, Merseyside. I was a curator of social industrial history. I then was interested in more the learning side of it, so I went and did some of that, and then became head of education for Beamish Museum. I was at a meeting and ended up with a casual conversation, and somebody said, "What could we do here?" And I had a couple of discussions, and I got a phone call saying, "Would you like to come and work for us?" So it's getting involved in networks and being willing to just take a risk. I went from a very, very, very successful museum service to a place which was a backwater in the tourism and visitor attraction world, but taking on a challenge and seeing the opportunity, and then expressing that and articulating that to the owners, whatever the structure might be. It could be run by a English Heritage, National Trust, whatever. So but I don't think it's the people who generally, people can do heritage management postgraduate courses. There's several of those running around the country, and that get experience. I would say that the ones that most people I come across have a huge range of backgrounds. They come from accountancy backgrounds, they come from business backgrounds, they come from heritage management museums. So there's no real profile. But I came through history and in effect education was what was my career path, if we want to but it was a lot of luck. It's like picking the phone call up. A lot of it is being there at the right time in the right place, talking to the right people, and just taking a risk. Sometimes I stepped out of a very good job into what became a very, very good job, but I didn't know that at the time. I could have been making a really foolish career mistake, but it was planned without planning. But I would say that get involved. If there's a local attraction, if you're interested in working in a heritage attraction, get in touch with a local attraction, see if you can help out, because it's there's a lot goes on in those places which people can support and engage with, which people with some an academic rigor and interest in subject matter are always welcome to be involved. I
think that's a really encouraging message for our students, and something I think we would all definitely support as academics. So the final question, I think we've just got 4 minutes left. So Alexandra would like to ask, what was the greatest challenge managing the area doing filming? Did you have to set extra rules?
The biggest challenge, that is something which, I can remember actually. The biggest challenge was the fact that, and I think I mentioned this earlier on, we had 70 American students living in the castle. And the filming could go on from early morning till late at night. And making sure that although they were thrilled to bits to be living in a film set, they still were living, and they had to carry on with their studies and their living. So it was managing the fact that we had 70 young American students in a strange country living in a castle. Let's face it, an American living in a castle was quite unusual. And that their lives weren't disrupted, even though they thought it was exciting. Their directors and their residential directors had to manage the fact that they were not distracted from their studies and their life. That was probably the biggest challenge, because I think because we were quite used to having people disrupting our days, that wasn't so much of a problem. But it was just that internal management. Oh, the other thing, sorry, there was one other thing, making sure that all the snow was cleared up.
I mean, these are crazy problems, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like, to make sure that all the snow is cleared up.
Yeah.
I think that's a fabulous way to end our webinar today. I think that just the breadth of the conversation and that kind of crossing over between all these different areas that we've been discussing, you know, the film, the heritage, the literature, tourism management, careers, destinations, you know, all of these things. I think it's such a rich area for us to hear about and to gain experience from your experience. So I'd like to just end by thanking you very much, Stephen, for the webinar today, and we hope very much to keep in contact with you going forward. Our next public life event will be with Arit Halpin, so we will keep you appraised of that. Do sign up for it. It's going to be, I'm just checking the date now. It's going to be, I can't see the date. Oh my goodness. It'll be coming through to your inboxes. Anushka tells me it's the 6th of June. I do apologise. So yes, do sign up for that. That promises to be another fabulous webinar. Stephen, once again, thank you very, very much for this webinar, and thank you to everybody for attending.
Thank you and
goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.